Good afternoon, Robert Scribbler. It is Tuesday, September 18th, 2018. Thank you for joining me for another climate change and clean energy video blog. Now, for this segment, I am going to talk about the impacts of Hurricane Florence, and as you can see from this video from ABC News's Twitter feed, Florence is still blanketing parts of the United States with heavy cloud cover, heavy rains, and extreme weather as it moves off the northeast, as it moves toward the northeast coast. So more than a multi-day event here for the United States that has caused massive damage and unfortunately serious losses, both in the physical respect and a tragic series of loss of life due to just a storm that just won't quit. Now, looking at the satellite shot, we can see Florence in the most recent satellite shot by provided by the National Hurricane Center and NOAA, with the circulation now caught up in a trough and moving off toward the east and northeast finally, but still amplifying the trough pattern and producing still considerable rains from Virginia on up into the northeast. I'm going to go through a list of the impacts related to Hurricane Florence and the remnants of Tropical Storm Florence and the remnants of Florence as it persisted for multiple days, particularly over North Carolina, but over numerous states. And it's now estimated that between $17 and $22 billion in total damage has been inflicted by this severe storm. At least 33 lives have been lost, approximately 25 in North Carolina, 1 in Virginia, and 6 in South Carolina. In North Carolina alone, 343,000 people are still estimated to be without power. A total of 2,600 water rescues at least have been executed by first responders. This does not include efforts by the Cajun Navy, a volunteer force which has evacuated numerous locations to include a nursing home. A record 36 inches of rain fell in Elizabethtown, North Carolina, which shattered the previous record for North Carolina during a tropical cyclone, which was around 24 inches. The Cape Fear River, numerous rivers across North Carolina are still rising, and the Cape Fear River itself is expected to crest at 62 feet. Many of these rivers are expected to crest either tonight or sometime tomorrow, so the flooding situation in North Carolina has not abated. In a number of cases, it has grown worse. Wilmington, North Carolina is still isolated, with few routes into the city, and 60% of the buildings reported now to be without power due to access having been cut off and lack of fuel for generation supplies, which makes me think that a number of facilities, including some of the news facilities down there in Wilmington, could probably use some solar power with storage, because such systems are much more resilient to impacts such as these. Let's see, parts of Fayetteville are underwater due to the rising Cape Fear River. Hope Mills has been evacuated due to concern over a potential for a dam failure. It's worth noting that the dam at Hope Mills, as of my last check, had not failed. Officials had lowered dam water levels behind the dam prior to Florence's strike, which was a good preventative measure. So we don't have a report of the dam at Hope Mills failing as of yet. Let's hope that does not happen. Jacksonville, North Carolina is under evacuation due to heavy flooding. And several hog waste ponds have overflowed, spilling hazardous waste into rivers and waterways in North Carolina. A coal ash pit managed by Duke Energy has been compromised by the flooding, resulting in the expulsion of toxic materials. And the nuke plant at Brunswick has been shut down due to flooding, with a minor emergency at the facility, the lowest level emergency reported due to flooding. There has been no clarification that I'm aware of on this declaration of minor emergency, but as of now, there's little to no evidence that any of the reactor facilities or nuclear waste facilities themselves have been compromised in a major way. The nuke plant was shut down ahead of the storm and as a preventative measure. It's worth noting that if you look at this satellite shot, I don't know if you can see it very well, but there is a large brown and gray area, gray coloration in the waters along the coastal regions of North Carolina and South Carolina. This due to the flux of floodwaters, the flush of floodwaters downstreams and into the ocean, which are carrying a massive amount of debris into this region. It's worth noting that since sea surface temperatures are so warm in this region, that we might want to keep an eye on this region for the potential for algae blooms. Sometimes after extraordinary rain events, you can see these blooms. It's certainly not a foregone conclusion, but it is something to look at. Now, I'd just like to finally talk about some of the base conditions that amplified Florence. I've talked about this on a number of occasions, but this bears repeating. Warmer than normal sea surfaces amplified Florence, and we have had some scientific reports, attribution studies, stating that the rainfall potential of Florence in particular was increased by 50% due to these warmer than normal sea surface temperatures. What I want to look at right now is the sea surface temperature footprint following the movement of Florence through these warmer than normal waters. And it's worth noting that powerful and slow-moving hurricanes tend to generate a significant amount of upwelling, pulling up cooler waters from the depths, which results in cooling at the surface. Now, I just want to call your attention to this because Florence itself has had rather small impacts on sea surfaces near the U.S. East Coast when it comes to sea surface temperature anomalies. We do have some negative sea surface temperature anomalies near the North Carolina coast due to Florence-related upwelling, but it's very mild. And overall, sea surface temperatures remain well above average off the U.S. East Coast, off the Southeast Coast, and far out into the Atlantic Ocean. So the fuel that was provided for Florence by warmer than normal sea surface temperatures associated with human-caused climate change have not been abated by this particular storm. So unfortunately, the U.S. East Coast, as well as the Gulf Coast in many regions, is still vulnerable should a storm approach the East Coast. Now, it's worth noting that the tropics have calmed down a bit. There's been a large influx of dust from Africa, which appears to have helped tamp down the tropical convergence zone. So let's hope that that remains the case and we don't get more storms near the East Coast, because there is quite a bit of fuel at this time for storms in the form of much warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, which help to spike Florence's intensity. So a very hard hit from Florence, massive damages, multiple regions still evacuated, the city of Wilmington still stranded. Unfortunately, the death toll rising and damages in well above $10 billion in total estimates, with insured losses probably in the range of $1 to $5 billion at least. So a very hard hit. Thank you for joining me, and I'll be chatting with you soon.